Thanks, Brad. Mike Kaiser. I'm one of the co-founders of the Pier 150, and we're going to get right to the content here. I have four of your colleagues that have agreed to kind of share some ideas prior to going into the breakout sessions, hopefully provide a little bit of inspiration for the discussion. So with each one of them, I'd just like you to do a quick introduction of yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into the questions. Chris, let's start with you.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here today and appreciate the invitation to have this dialogue because I'm sure I'm going to learn as much as I'm hopefully going to give. But been with Macy's my entire career, have had HR business partner experiences in literally every part of the business. Most recently, a year ago, I was asked to work with the supply chain leader. And in supply chain at Macy's, it's everything from our private label product development to our planning of placement, whether goods go to our .com facilities or to stores, and then running 27 facilities where we have hourly colleagues. So I've got a blend of professional and hourly colleagues that I support.
Thanks for joining us today, Chris. Greg.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Greg Hill with a company called Exos. We are a company that basically does professional coaching for everybody from elite athletes and teams to corporations and organization offsites. So been the company about 3 years. Prior to that, I was with a company called Equinox for about 7 years. And prior to that, 20 years in HR with hospitality. And good to see you, Tim, on the call. So that's my background. And like Chris, I'm looking forward to the conversation and learning a little bit from the peers on the call.
Thanks so much, Greg. Let's go with Brendan next. Brendan.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Weber. I'm CEO and co-founder of Nava Benefits. Nava is a mission-driven benefits brokerage oriented around helping small and medium-sized employers lower their overall cost of healthcare while providing better benefits for employees. And I think the key insight that we had was when engaging with very large employers, Fortune 500 folks, we saw that they were deploying different kinds of strategies, tools, technologies, and best practices for their employee groups that many of those things could be brought down market to employers with between 100 and 1,000 employees. And so we've effectively been focused on how do we package that up and bring that down to the small but mighty HR teams that have 1, 2, maybe 3 people without really deep domain experience around healthcare to enable them to deliver better outcomes for their employees. And I think as we were chatting about it ahead of time, we have folks in 21 different states. We serve employers all across the country and also just really enjoyed this group. There's been a lot of great thought leadership and dialogue back and forth in our interactions too. So excited to learn, excited to share what we've learned.
Thanks for joining us, Brandon. And Alana.
Hi, everyone. I am Alana. I get to work closely with Brandon at Nava. I'm the director of people and talent here. So I lead the strategic direction of our hiring, our culture, engagement, and retention. And within this realm, I really have a particular passion for helping companies grow and creating a psychologically safe environment. And I think, we've all been through a roller coaster these past few years as HR leaders, and this year is no exception, and excited to chat with all of you and learn from each other.
Thanks, Alana. And so, Chris, let's start with you. Alana asked you a good lead in. The economic landscape has changed drastically, even from a year ago. You look back at 3 years ago, and it seems like a distant memory. So as you look at 2023, things are happening in the economics. Layoffs are happening at some of the tech companies. We've got inflation. There's a whole different landscape out there. What are some of the things from the talent strategy you're looking at that are sort of top of mind that you're trying to address at Macy's?
Well, I'm going to look at this from both our professional and our hourly colleagues. So from our professional, it is certainly about retention which isn't to say that's not important with the hourly, but the way we address it is very different. So with our professionals, during COVID, we went from an organization that never could get their head around being able to work remote to having everybody work remote overnight. And we adapted and we survived, and actually we thrived. And so we are still in the camp of we're going to stay hybrid. We've got offices that people can go into. You come in when it's important and you make it meaningful. And that, I think, has been really important as many of these companies are starting to call people back. some of my colleagues are saying, are we going to be told to come back? Because I don't want to come back 5 days a week or 3 days a week. I like what we're doing. I like the fact that we make it meaningful when we come in. So certainly having flexibility is important. Would love to hear if any of our colleagues are doing the 4-day work week, because I'm sure that's going to be the next thing, since it was in the Wall Street Journal the other day. People are going to be looking for that. We also spend a great deal of energy investing in development. So we have both our internal development programs that we run. We have some of for equity development, we've got some programs that focus specifically on our minority executives and developing them. And then the other thing is, a year ago, we rolled out Guild, which is a way that colleagues we've got a partnership with Guild, where if they take college, undergrad, and certificate programs, we pay for it 100% regardless of the grade. All they need, they just need to finish the program. So that has been a great success. So that, I would say, has really been important in the professional landscape. With the hourly, it's about connection, and especially in supply chain, which I mentioned, I just joined a year ago. We've got a new leader in supply chain. He's all about doing right by the colleague, making sure that the leaders are connecting with them. We've reduced our turnover by 2 years ago, we reduced it by 40%, last year by 32%, which is significant in the hourly landscape. And it's all about having conversations with the colleagues, making sure the leaders know who they are. We've also done a fair amount of work on our wages for the hourly. So, we had fallen behind. We're now much more competitive, and both from an hourly standpoint, as well as we've put in small bonus programs for all of our colleagues.
Thanks, Chris. It's interesting. You talk a lot about the talent retention part of it. And I think, the past couple of years, it's all been about talent acquisition, right? Hey, can we find the people? And now it's really focusing, I think, a little bit more on, can we keep the people that we have and keep them happy and connected? That's a huge thing, obviously. So, Greg, from your perspective, what's plenty of challenges to talk about, right? What's kind of top of mind for you as far as 2023?
Thank you. I would say a lot of what Chris mentioned, we've learned how to kind of combine development and communities together. So in addition to employee resource groups, we're thinking about who wants to learn similar things or needs to based on talent calibration. And so that's a big unlock for us, where we're kind of building community within community based on learning interests or roles. And so that's helped us a lot. And we partner with, surprisingly, there's a lot of companies doing a lot of development for a partnership for free, including McKinsey. So we've learned a little bit about that, and we're bringing that a little further this year. I think for us, like many, we've learned that where you work and how you work is a currency or remuneration. So we're treating it that way. So we differentiate on work from home versus work anywhere. That's resonated very well for our organization. So we don't differentiate if you're at home or on the beach, as long as your work's getting done. And I think that's evolved a little bit, particularly with our old school managers and learning how to manage teams versus manage locations has been the journey that we're leveraging right now. So those are two big pieces for us. For us, we also do have UBU Fridays. That's a big deal for us. And so, like Chris, we have a corporate organization, and then we have a very large field organization that's global and supports about 500 companies. So it's a really complicated model where, yes, it's been in the journal, but I would say all the tests and stuff that we've read in London and Europe, they've largely been small startup companies. To introduce that to a service-based global organization is a very different model. And so we're learning that piece. The second phase of it starts April 3rd, and the communication and survey process has been really unique, but we've learned that is probably the most important currency. And the last thing I would say that most of us have probably done is we really have gone away from our annual increase process and gone to a talent and compensation process year round. And so there are strategies to it, but even though we might be going into a recession and people are looking at work and how they work differently, we don't feel we're in a position where we're going to wait once a year. And so we do that. And it also allows us to talk about how inflation and wages and the relationship they have or don't have year round versus people building up expectations for 6 to 9 months and so forth. So those are some key pieces for us. We've taken, as a company of coaches, we've also introduced 5 coaches that are dedicated to our organization. And they are everything from PhDs in psychology to neurologists to movement and exercise coaches. And so that has landed as a very big benefit for us. In some audiences, for peer learning, they want to hear how someone else is doing something they're interested in. And for others, based on a need, whether they're at their home or hybrid or wherever they may be. And so those are a couple of things that we piloted. There's several things we piloted that didn't work last year, but those are the ones that really had some traction that we're bringing forward.
Oh, thanks, Greg. I really like the idea. You know, we've heard a lot about employee expectations, right? And they were a certain thing prior to COVID, you know, something different during COVID. And I think now there's something a little different. You know, what's become an exception in some cases is now the norm and expected by a lot of companies. And it sounds like you've got a lot of programs kind of dealing with that, sort of that personal wellness and health and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I know Brandon and Alana could talk a lot more about it, but I would say a couple of things that have happened that I've experienced is I think there's no longer stigma in any organization about EAP or what EAP was. Mm-hmm. Two, I don't think EAP is defined as what it was even a year ago. So I would say how we're helping people through either peer communities or professionals has been very different. But two, the idea that people can do it in communities is new for us. It used to be, I got to call a number and I want to be anonymous. Now it's right. Who else is feeling, seeing, or doing the same thing I'm doing. And all of a sudden you're building a community that's also eliminating the stigma. So we've seen some real success in doing that.
Oh, that's great to hear. Great to hear. So Brandon, I know you have a lot of exposure to HR leaders within organizations. Is there anything you've seen that's kind of bubbling to the top as far as a focus for a lot of organizations when they look at their talent strategy?
I mean, I think that and just to give a backdrop for this group, like we serve everyone from publicly traded technology companies that have 3,000 to 5,000 employees spread over the country to a 250 employee manufacturing company in Spokane, Washington. So there's like this really broad, I think, landscape of folks that we're talking to. Some unifying themes, I think, is everyone feels a lot of uncertainty. It just feels like an incredibly uncertain year that we're going into. We've got some industries that totally feel like they're in a recession right now, and like 75% of the companies are doing layoffs. And then we see the jobs report, and we've got other industries that are like, I am trying to hire rapidly, and I still feel like I'm in the kind of the talent acquisition, struggle. Everyone is sharing kind of uncertainty around what's happening with inflation and its downstream impacts. And so there's this backdrop, and I think the action step that is being taken, and we're trying to partner with our clients on this, is pulling the conversation earlier with the C-suite, depending on where, what the complexion of your organization is. And HR leaders, we talk a lot about, HR needing a seat at the table. I think that's a conversation that probably this group has been having, we've been having, and it's even more important now because HR is being asked to do so much more than even they were 3 years ago. And so what we're seeing is, and we're participating in this, is early conversations with the C-suite to say, hey, let's talk about the business constraints, like goals. Let's really get our heads wrapped around what the CEO is trying to accomplish or what the organization is trying to accomplish, because that's going to have really important downstream impacts on how we define benefit strategy, how we define a lot of the things that are happening inside of the HR department. So there's been a pull forward. We've shared kind of a playbook for how to do that, because a lot of times those conversations early on can feel fairly existential. So that's a big one. So there's this uncertainty. And then I think the other thing, and again, we're wearing our hat where we help with benefits, and we really orient around benefits as it relates to talent acquisition and talent retention. There's this big shift from like the COVID had us in this like kind of mindset of like, we've got to just offer more. There was just so much expansion in terms of benefits that we offered, in terms of benefit categories, from, digital mental health, caregiving services, all these things, kind of throwing them at the wall, to now this like notion of like do more with less. And so the HR teams that we support are contending with this. I literally was just off the phone with someone yesterday where like they're in like a 15% budget reduction like paradigm right now. And so now they're having to figure out, well, how the heck do we right size our spend as it relates to that without really alienating the employees and the folks that we've tried to support on the things that they care most about? And so that's led to like a real data-driven analysis on, okay, who's using what's really moving the needle, and where can we reduce the overall spend without really like making a big negative impact on the employee's situation. And so there's kind of a corollary to that, which is we're seeing this like status quo of like 10 to 15% healthcare cost increases is just like no longer tenable. Like truly, it's just a full stop. Like we now need to like open up the aperture of alternatives to the fully insured United Healthcare plan that we've been on for 4 years. Everyone's just like, oh, let's just see if we can stomach it. To we actually have to look at real, more creative alternatives to reduce that cost. And so that's some of the kind of shift from like do more to do more with less. And then I'll just say one thing, and I'll just piggyback off, I think what Chris was talking about. I can't tell you how often we are talking about what is the right strategy for hybrid remote for our organization. Like it's just so top of mind right now. And it's so top of mind for talent. Like they truly are. Like Nava is a very proudly remote first culture that also very proudly cares a lot about getting together in person. And happy to talk more about how we've threaded that needle. And Alana is truly kind of a thought leader on this front for us. But I can't tell you how like pressing that topic feels to the HR teams that we are serving as we need to figure out a good strategy here, not just let's just go try 4-day work week because, X said it, or, here's the prevailing winds. It's like, what is our why behind our strategy? And so we're spending a lot of time on that. We've got strong opinions there. And I do really think that is a very personalized set of decisions that you need to make for your organization and your culture and your size. And it is like the opposite of one size fits all. It's just like so bespoke. So those are kind of 3 big things. Alana, anything from your view that I've missed?
Yeah, I think piggybacking off you, last year or the past few years has really been about growing quickly, experimenting, investing in new benefits to differentiate ourselves in the market, to this year coming up against more uncertainty. And I think in that environment, it's all about creating efficiency and extreme clarity and alignment on company goals. So a little bit of what you were speaking to earlier on. And I think there are 2 main challenges with that. One is around efficiency. So how do HR leaders do more with less? In this time of uncertainty, like our employees still need a lot of support. So ensuring we're making high quality investments that have an impact, whether that's through benefits, culture initiatives, or training. And then I think the second big thing is just around communication. Again, in times of uncertainty, communication is more important than ever, whether that's remote first or in an office. Really, in order to align on company goals, we have to over communicate. We have to be transparent. We have to create space for employee questions. And I think, there's a study that says it takes 7 times of saying the same thing for it to stick with employees. So just finding different venues to over communicate so that employees feel like they have an understanding of what's going on.
Well, thanks, Alana. Thanks, Brandon. And I will kind of reiterate, the things that Chris said about the hybrid workforce and making those, I think a lot of organizations are struggling with how do we make those interactions meaningful, right? We're a remote first organization. We want to have people get together, but we've got to make it meaningful so that they want to come in and they don't feel like they're forced to, because that's sort of counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate all your perspectives. And so I think now we're going to get ready to go to the breakout rooms. But before we do, we're going to have a vote for the breakout room topic. It should be popping up right here. So if you can vote on that, we'll get the results here in a minute. And for each one of you leaders of the sessions, the questions to the winning topic will be, Brad will put those out in the chat.